So we're back at Imola. Excellent. Love that part of the world. Love the circuit. Of course, everything we say about Imola is tempered by the events there in 1994. That always has to be remembered. But there are so many other aspects of Imola that we should embrace. Like any racetrack, really. You could say the same thing about Spa, about the Nürburgring, about many tracks, Watkins Glen in America. When we used to go back there was always that feeling of, the bittersweet feeling of loving the place, but also of sad memories. And so it is, of course, with Imola. But let's be positive about Imola. Great, great part of the country. Great country in which to be holding races. Italy, 3 Grand Prix this year. Congratulations to them. No fans going to Imola this weekend, sadly, because of the way COVID is beginning to grow again in the fall season, as predicted by everyone. And before we get on to Imola, a few little bits of news. Felix Rosenquist leaving Ganassi in IndyCar to go and drive for the Arrow McLaren Schmidt-Peterson team. Good news, I think. Good to see Felix at McLaren. Good to see Zach Brown being quoted, welcoming Felix as a McLaren driver. Top man Felix, very, very underrated driver. I've made the point several times. Absolute disgrace that he's never been given even a Formula One test, let alone anything else. But there he is in IndyCar, and good to see him in a McLaren. So looking forward to that next year. Kimi Raikkonen and Antonio Giovinazzi staying with Alfa Romeo for another year, 2021. No real surprise, I think, for Kimi. I mean, Kimi wants to keep racing. I mean, what else is he going to do? Of course. And he drove so well in Portugal, didn't he, in those early laps? So good to see that. We love having Kimi around. Giovinazzi, slightly more of a surprise, I think, but fairness to Alfa and to Ferrari, at least they're sticking with it. If a driver has a team behind him like that after a so-so season, that will do a lot for his confidence and for his hopefully upward turning graph of performance. Anyway, let's move on to Imola, because for me, Imola engenders a million different images. And I've been thinking over the last few days of what I do think about when I hear the word Imola. The film at the beginning of this, that lovely colour footage, was shot by Jonathan Tate, who was a very close friend of Rob Walker, and he's invited by the Walker team to go to several Grand Prix in the 60s, in the mid-60s. And he went to the 63 Imola Grand Prix, a Shell Grand Prix of Imola, I think it was actually called, which is the first Formula One race ever held in Imola. Won, as you can see there, by Jimmy Clark in the Lotus 25. And we're very fortunate to have that footage. So a big thank you to Christopher, John's son, to let us have that footage at the beginning. And I'll be running that on all 3 videos as we go to the weekend. So that was 63. And then the next time Imola surfaced in Formula One, guys, was 1979. I was at that race, actually. It was a hot late summer race. I remember we stayed at Carlos Reutemann. I was running Carlos at the time, and he was at Lotus, and we stayed at the Gran Baglioni in Bologna. Beautiful hotel, beautiful city, lovely time of the year. I remember it as being sort of dusty and fairly quiet, the sort of image you have of Italy in the late summer when everybody's still just on holiday before they've come back. And it was that sort of feel. And Carlos had driven up from Monaco, where he lived, actually south France. He wasn't in Monaco, he was in France, Cap Ferrat, in his company car, which was a Lotus Esprit Turbo. I remember him. We went to the track on well, I guess it was Thursday. Colin Chapman flew in. He was there, and one of the did you have a good trip, Carlos? How'd the car go? Oh, very good, very good, Colin. I tell you, this car, the handling is better than the Lotus 79, no question. So that set the tone for the weekend. By then, Carlos was already thinking, I want to be in a Williams in 1980. I've got to get out of here. So a little bit was that. But Carlos actually finished second in that race. Niki Lauda won it in the Brabham Alpha. That was his only proper win in the Brabham Alpha. I say that because, of course, he did win the 78 Italian Grand Prix, but that was coloured by the restart after poor Ronnie's accident. And secondly, both Gilles and Mario had that rather dubious 10-second penalty for jumping the start, and so the race went to Niki. But this was a proper win on the road for Niki Lauda in the Brabham Alpha, with Carlos a very good second actually in the Lotus, because it wasn't a very good car at that point, and Imola was a pretty spooky circuit even then. No chicanes anywhere, and flat through Tamburello obviously, and flat from memory from I think there was a bottom chicane. The Variante Bassa was had been in vogue then. So yeah, but it was a good fun weekend. And then the 1980 Italian Grand Prix was staged at Imola. It wasn't the San Marino Grand Prix; it was the Italian Grand Prix. So that was good. And here I'm gonna. This is a bit of a memory lane trip video. So I hope you're going to enjoy it. It won't be too long. Just lots of things that I've found that photographs mainly that I took at Imola over the years, particularly a year that I'm going to be talking about in a second. But here, in 1980, the pole was taken by Jean-Pierre Jabouille in the Renault. And as I did then, as a young journalist, I got the pole winner to annotate a lap of the circuit and then sign it. So I thought you'd like to see that. A very neat writing by Jean-Pierre Jabouille, very typical of Jean-Pierre. And then in 82, I got René Arnoux to do the same thing when he got the pole. And you can see virtually the same in terms of gear changing, obviously. But again, you can see very neat and precise detail there from both the drivers. So yeah, what do I think of with Imola? I think of 82, of course, just terrible memories of 82 and the way Pironi, in my mind, just completely double-crossed Gilles, who was the rightful winner of that race. And that led to everything that happened at Zolder. And 82 was, I remember having lots of chats with Gilles that weekend, about whether or not he could trust Pironi. I mean, that was a big discussion point before he went into the race. And Joanne, Gilles' wife, was obviously involved, and she was making the point that Gilles hadn't been invited to Didier's wedding and things like that. And then I think I was one of the first guys to speak to Gilles as he got out of the car after the race. He just ran down to the Ferrari garage, and I was sort of running with him, and he couldn't really say much because he was so upset and so angry. And yeah, so that's what I remember about 82. And then we got to 83. But before we get to 83, which is the one I want to show through photographs of, and this won't be too long, much longer, believe me, just a few other things. I will always, to me, one of the greatest ever single laps driven by anyone was in 1990 when Nigel Mansell was in the Ferrari 641, 642, which was the John Barnard car, beautifully developed over the winter by Enrico Scalabroni. New rear suspension, a lot of things, bigger Goodyear tyres, and thus the new rear suspension, but also a lot of other refinements, particularly aero. And Alan Prost never liked the car initially. And he had a lot of buffeting around the cockpit, but Nigel got in it and just loved it. And that was the moment when Alain thought, yeah, I got to get somebody from McLaren in here as well, because obviously Scalabroni's favouring Nigel, Enrique being an ex-Williams engineer. And he got Steve Nichols in, of course. Anyway, that's another story. We went to Imola, and Nigel was just super quick, and Prost was kind of off it all weekend. And in the race, the Ferrari engine wasn't as quick as the Honda, no way. But he was with Gerhard Berger and towards the closing stages of the race. And they'd gone through Tamburello, and Berger basically just gently eased Nigel onto the grass on the left, because Nigel was obviously trying to make a move going into Tosa. And he was on the grass, and Nigel had a 360 on the grass in top gear in the Ferrari. Got back pointing in the right direction, and the following lap set the fastest lap of the race. And that's the lap I'm talking about. I think for any driver to do that is just, well, it's breathtaking, really, and it's a staggering thing. I've never seen anything like that, but it was a pretty good summation of everything that Nigel Mansell was all about as a racing driver. So that was 1990 was an amazing day for me. Anyway, let's go back to 1983, because this was the year after, obviously, Gilles' accident at Zolder. And if you think about it now, the pressure is almost unimaginable. Here's Patrick Tambay, this very good-looking, dapper, suave, quick French racing driver who had discovered, with James Hunt, Gilles Villeneuve in this Atlantic race in Canada in 1976, 75. And had told Marlboro had helped Gilles come to Formula One. So they were incredibly close as friends. And Gilles actually stayed in Patrick's apartment for a while when he first came over from Europe to Europe. And anyway, Gilles has the accident. Patrick gets his drive at Ferrari. And imagine that alone. And then you get to Imola in 1983, a year after all the drama between Gilles and Didier Pironi. and Patrick is in Ferrari number 27. And the 83 car is not actually that different from the 82 car either. It's still the V6 turbo. Mauro Folgheri's around a bit more, but it's the same mechanics, it's the same engineers. And Patrick is in this vortex of pressure to have to be Patrick Tambay in a Ferrari, but at the same time, of course, everybody's talking and thinking about Gilles, as is Patrick. And Ferrari have their own pressure, which is, we want to win this race. And Rene Arnou's on the pole. And Patrick pulls up on the grid, and on the night before the race, somebody has painted the Canadian flag in Patrick's grid position. I've got a photo. Anyway, let me take you through the weekend, because these are photographs that I took in that 1983 Imola weekend. They're not necessarily in an order that makes chronological sense, or in the order I actually took the pictures, I guess is what I'm really trying to say. But they are a fair summation of Imola 1983.